Hi, I'm Kurt Franz. Welcome to the presentation, Motivations for Ideologies, How Understanding Them Can Enrich Your Life. There's three things I want to do in this presentation. First is to describe what it is that drives people to embrace particular ideologies. Second, why ideologues of different ideologies have a difficult time, sometimes it's impossible to communicate between them. I will explain as part of that why things that seem unfathomable, inexplicable, can be understood. I will explain the unexplainable. And third and most importantly, by presenting this material, understanding this material, you have the opportunity to enrich your life in all aspects of your life. It's really profound. It can't be overstated, the importance. By ideologies, I'm going to talk about it in a very high-level sense. Now, people think of ideologies, political ideologies, as conservative, libertarian, liberal, socialist, statist, fascist, those sets of things. But I want to raise it up a level higher than that. Like we think about religious beliefs as sort of, you can talk about this type of Christian, Muslim, or a Christian sect, Muslim sect, on and on. But I like to split it up, raise it up higher and think of theistic or atheistic. And in all those other particular religions are flavors of the theistic side. In political ideology, I sort of look at it as two ways. You are a freedom-oriented ideology, where freedom is the greatest good for a government, protecting freedoms is the greatest good for a government responsibility, or the others, the ones that are not that. So I look at it as two. Sometimes I'll slip in and call liberal the other, the non-freedom oriented one, but I'll explain why in a little bit. So think of the natural world. Freedom is innate to the natural world. It is a given. It is obviously attainable, and it is there unless something impinges on it. There are no rules, there's no regulations. Every creature in the natural world is free to do whatever its abilities, whatever its desires, whatever its motivations lead it to do or try to do. Now, sometimes there's a conflict with a predator and a prey, and one's freedoms may be sacrificed for the desires, needs of another. Humans are a social animal, and when we come together, our desires may conflict as well. So what we put in place, as any social animal does, some types of rules and regulations which enable the greatest good to sort of continue with their freedoms. So you have pecking orders in other species or earlier societies of man. It could be based on age, experience, wisdom, looks, strength, many different things. And you could look at that as a government. When humans put that together, if that primary responsibility for the set of rules is to protect the freedoms. The government does not give those freedoms. They're already there. They are innate. Nature provided, God provided, whatever you want to call them, they're innate. They're there. But they can be lost. They can be impinged upon. So if the purpose of government is to protect the innate freedoms, that's the one form of ideology. We often refer to that maybe a libertarian or a conservative or something, but those have other meanings for different people. So I want to sort of leave it at this freedom-oriented ideology versus the non-freedom-oriented. And the standard non-freedom-oriented is something that's around equality of state, where the government tries to have people operate at the same level of state. That's something that does not exist in nature. It is not innate. In fact, the exact opposite is innate. Everybody's different genetically, and if not genetically, by desires and abilities and motivations, whatever it is that they're, likes and dislikes. So we are necessarily unequal at that level. We would like this notion of equality of treatment to be in place for the government, that my desires are not less than your desires, my needs don't matter less to the government than your needs, or having them satisfied, and we don't impinge on one another's abilities to meet our needs, to follow our desires. So an ideology that wants to have equality of state is necessarily unnatural, is necessarily anti-human, and ultimately is undesirable. We would not want everybody to be the same. It's variety's the spice of life, right? Vive la différence. We want the differences in place. So a government that is there, that limits freedoms, it has to be a big structure because it has to work against our human nature, it has to work against nature itself to try to achieve a greater equality of state, which is ultimately undesirable, is a non-rational ideology, operating against humanity, against nature, against what is in our best interest. Now, why would ideologies exist like that? Well, when you act in a way that's non-rational, it's because you're being driven by emotions. There's something else that's driving the desire to have this undesirable entity, at least on its face undesirable. There is a reason why it's desirable for some. Where is it that our motivations come from? It's not always about follow the money. People use that line, but it's not the case, right? I mean, you don't choose where you're going to have for dinner tonight based on which one's more valuable to you monetarily wise. Who's going to be your friends based on money? What movie you're going to watch? What you're going to do with it as a hobby in your spare time? It's not what motivates criminals often. I mean, yes, crooks, but rapists, many murderers, doing out of passion, crimes of passion. They're not motivated by following the money, but they do something extreme. There's something more fundamental than money. Money is just, you could be on a deserted island with all the money in the world. It doesn't do anything for you. That's not going to satisfy your wishes, your desires. It's a mechanism people use to apply themselves to something else to get the desires met. Our fundamental motivations come out of our fundamental needs as a human. Right? Psychologists call it sort of a hierarchy of needs, and we all understand the survival needs. Right? We have to eat, we have to drink, we have to breathe. We need some level of shelter, some level of security. We can't always be in a hyper vigilant state. In order to be able to relax, you have some level of security. So these are sort of core, lowest level human needs. And for most people in this time, this day and age, those needs are largely satisfied. Right? There's some homeless people and people that go hungry, but not high in number. The next level of need is one that is often not met, and that's the need for self-esteem, how you think about yourself, the need for self-love, how you feel about yourself. And combined, I call those the sense of self. So if you have a low sense of self, that's a need that is not being met, your fixation is on getting that need met. Just as if you were starving, your focus is going to be on getting food. If you were drowning and floundering in water that's too deep for you, your need is to get air. Your focus is on survival, so getting air. If you are not getting your needs for self-esteem and self-love met, your focus is on those. You become a navel-gazer, seeking to get those met. Now, because it's not a survival need, you can go without that need met and still live. But the living is less than rich, right? There's an inner turmoil, a wounded soul, an inner wretchedness, depending on how low the sense of self is, that is going to be driving a lot of action. So a lot of people who commit crimes, these are people with a low sense of self. So when you're navel-gazing, you're not thinking about other people, right? They're not your concern. When you're drowning, you're just grasping for whatever. If you are being attacked, you may kill somebody else out of self-defense. You may steal food for your family because there's this need for food, right, for your loved ones. Sense of self is not that blatant, but it drives a lot of people. So murderers and rapists, and they're having a desire satisfied for them by doing these heinous crimes. But a lot of people won't go there because partly for there's consequences for those actions, but they do it at more subtle levels. So you engage people in conversations, and you look to be a pleaser, or you look to dominate them and get them to agree, and then you have this sense of other people are supporting me, or I'm gaining some level of trust or liking from others, so therefore maybe I can like myself more. It never works, but there's the motivation. That you want to fill this need for loving or thinking more highly of yourself. You want to impress on other people, your abilities, your skills, your knowledge, or you want to connect with other people so they like you more, so they give you strokes, and you give them strokes, and hopefully that'll satisfy what seems missing within. But that's not what works. Those things really have to come from the person. All relationships grow out of a relationship you have with yourself. And politics, for example, is always about relationships. So if there's a wounded relationship within, that will expand out. It can grow into an ideology. So there are a list of traits that a person with a strong sense of self has and a person with a low sense of self has. And there's nobody fully one and fully the other. It is a continuum, but people will tend to move on one side, further down that side over time, if they're on a low sense of self, or to a higher sense of self if they're on that side. Because they'll have expectations of success, for instance, and then they'll succeed in part because of those expectations, and they can feel more capable, more confident about themselves. I thought I could do it, and I could do it. Or if I don't think I can, I'll go ahead and try. I failed, I knew I was going to fail. Down you go. So I got a list of traits of a person with a strong sense of self that represent strong sense of self and low sense of self. And I will share this with you. I'll cite a couple of them and explain why it becomes obvious when you read them. So something like secrecy. If I don't like who I am, if I don't think highly of who I am, I'm likely to want to be secret about who I am to others. So I will keep secrets. If I'm confident in who I am and I like who I am, I'm going to be more open and honest about that. A person with a low sense of self will tend to be a little deceitful, a little look over this way, look over that way, sleight of hand. Because if you really knew me, you would not like me. Because I don't like me. Why should you? They'll tend to be people who will take credit for things that they didn't do, right? To show some level of capability so you esteem me more. Or to push off blame or responsibility for something they did do to somebody else, because that might make me look less than in your eyes. And then I get lowered esteem from you, and I'm looking for the exact opposite. Sometimes they'll tend to be arrogant and brash, but that's a cover, right? A narcissistic personality is a person with a low sense of self, extremely low sense of self. Messiah complex, extremely low sense of self. But they're trying to fool others into thinking, oh, that guy must be something. Look how high and mighty he must be. He thinks that way of himself. Doesn't work. Right? People like this. You have the exact opposite response for the most part. But some people find that appealing. Oh, this guy is so good. Because at a lower level, they're connecting with that person. There's a projection that goes on. If I don't like who I am, I'm going to project myself someplace else onto somebody who is a good thing. And the people who are pretending to be the good things are the ones I'm going to see and want to associate with. So I project myself onto them guys. So yes, he is the Messiah-ish guy. He's an anointed one, right? I'm going to project myself that way. And you'll see these people with a low sense of self, they'll tend to gravitate, as another characteristic, this notion of control or power over others. Well, who wants to have power over others? Is freedom limiting? Is freedom robbing if you want to have power and control over others? Well, why does anybody want to do that? Like, for instance, the rapists or the murderer, like they're really exerting that. Well, because they have a lack of a sense of power and control in their own lives. Right? If I had power and control in my own lives, I wouldn't live in the wretched state that I'm in. Right? I would love myself. I would embrace myself. So therefore, I'm out of control. I'm unempowered within my own life. So I'm looking to grab that elsewhere, over other people. If I have it over other people, I must have it over myself. Right? It's not a conscious thought, but it's a feeling. These things predate in one's life rationality. You can't access them through reason. They're deeper than that. So people who seek positions of power and control over others, we used to call them as a helping profession. Maybe some people still do. But they're the controlling professions. So think of like teaching. Think of like politicians, lawyers, nurses, right? These are people who have sometimes life and death power over others or control over. You sit down, you do what you're told, right? Executives in a lot of businesses. I mean, executives in general, but executives in a lot of businesses, they aspire to that position because of the power that comes with that and the control they have over others from that. what we see in those positions are people, we tend to see people in those positions as people who are ideologically anti-freedom people. They're for the equality of state. They're what you would call liberals or socialists or progressives or statists, right? They want that big organization to limit freedoms. You know, freedom is a scary thing if you don't have a lot of esteem and love of self, because it means you're free to fail. And my belief would be I'm more likely to fail. So I'd rather have something in place, a fatherland, a motherland, something that's a big brother, that's taking control of things, that's ensuring I'll be safe, other people will be equal with me. If I'm equal with others, equal in state, then I'm not less than, which is what I innately feel myself to be. Not innately, but it is a learned thing, but it's learned very early in life. So it's a way for me to compensate, to try to address what is a need that is not being addressed, my needs for self-esteem and self-love. So think of the triumvirate that this culture bases itself on, right? God, family, country. Right? This is where we grow our greatness. And think of those who are this ideology that is anti-freedom. Use liberals as a stand-in for that. They do a lot of things that are against the country, and especially against the country as it was founded. Right? Because there's this notion of this country is in a better state than a lot of other countries. That's not right. That's not fair. Just as a micro level, I want people to be at my equality of state. If I'm equal with everyone else, then I'm not less than others. Right? That's what's egging at me. That's gnawing at me. So bring the country down as I bring others down to the same level of state. It operates against God, Christian God, because this is a Christian country. So it looks to undercut that. It's okay to support other religions, but not that one. It operates against the family. We've enabled single-parent households. In fact, made it so simple to do that there's a large number of those now at the cost of the child. We enable passing off our kids to daycare, and they lose their mom at those most important months and years. And this is where the sense of self is being formed. So by enabling these things, by undercutting the family, different family systems, they can be anything. It's not a mother and a father and their children. It could be any fluid thing you want it to be. When you undercut what nature has wired us to have and thrive in, our physiology depends on those things. If you undercut that, you weaken us as individuals, you weaken the sense of self, you weaken the country, and we weaken religion, Christian religion. But this is part of those ideologies, to move towards equality of state. Go after weakening the military, because having the strongest military in the world is unfair. They should be equal in state. So let other countries have this weapon or that weapon, and we should surrender this, that, and the other thing because we should be equal in state. This is what drives them. So part of the explaining of the unexplainable, this is a piece of that. Why do people want the country to be less than the best country in the history? Because that's not fair. And it comes out of me having a sense of being less than. I want things to be equal so that I'm not less than. Now, with this perspective, this sense of low sense of self, it has a couple other aspects to it. Well, many aspects, but two I'm going to focus on. One is you start to see people as you see yourself, as a victim. So people now are members of victim groups, they're victims. They're not empowered individuals. They're not the center of their own universe, worthy of respect. They're victims. They're members of groups that are victims. And when you have victims, you have to have oppressors. So these ideologies will always find, whether it's the Jews, the one percenters, the right-wing bodies, conspirators. You look to find somebody who's oppressing because I'm a victim, or they're victims here. There's racism, there's sexism, there's people who are against groups. Those are oppressors. So you see people as victims, as members of victim groups. So when you see, for instance, a person, in the case, say, of Barack Obama, who has his policies challenged when he first became president, people are saying, I don't like this idea, or Obamacare, whatever it is, and you give reasons for it. No, what you're doing is you're attacking the person. And you're attacking the person as a member of a group, therefore you're attacking the group because the guy's black, at least partly black. You're a racist. You're attacking all blacks. You say something negative about a policy from Hillary Clinton that rolls up into a group, a victim group, therefore you're a sexist. This is where this comes from. There's another aspect, the second aspect I want to talk about. It's fundamentally important to understand the miscommunications that happen. A person who recognizes as freedom as the greatest good, and the primary purpose of government is to protect freedoms, ensure that they are respected, has, at least in that aspect, rationality. They're a rational person. They can be reasoned with. They use words that convey truth, to convey assumptions, rationale, and you can have conversations because you can start from different assumptions, or some people may have data, others don't, and you can have these give and takes and come to new levels of awareness, raised levels of awareness. But a person with a low sense of self, reality is unpleasant, right? That's what I'm trying to get out of. That's what I don't like. So data and facts and things like that, those are thorny, right? I don't want to know. I don't really care about that. I don't care about truths. I don't care about realities, other than my own, which is a needy one. So what I'm looking for when I talk is to make emotional connections. So I'll say something that I feel will appeal to you, and we can make a connection. And I'll say something maybe different to somebody else who I feel they want to hear this other thing, and I will make my emotional connection there. So I might tell you X and them not X. But we've connected, and we've connected, so I'm consistent. This is not about lying. I didn't flip-flop. I'm not doing any of that stuff. I connected. Consistency. Right? That was my purpose. That's the purpose of communication for a low sense of self. Truth doesn't matter. Reason doesn't matter. Now, if you come at me from a different ideology, from a different perspective of what language is to be used for, and you start talking about this aspect and why this is not a good idea, or why I'm making an unhealthy choice here, what I'm experiencing is you are disconnected. You're purposely trying to disconnect from me emotionally. You're attacking me. And you're attacking my group. You're being mean. So I can put these isms on you, depending what groups I see myself as a member of. But I'm not going to accept anything. It doesn't matter if it's true. It doesn't matter if it's 100% rational, logical. That's not the purpose of language for me. So if you come at me that way, I'm operating with a different paradigm, and we are going to misconnect. So you look at Hillary Clinton with a long laundry list of scandals behind her. And there's people thinking that she'd be a good president. How? How can you possibly think? Well, no substantive accomplishments in decades of public life, and many, many scandals, dozens of scandals. But those are real things. Those are data points. Those are facts. Those are truths. To me, if I'm a low sense of self, they don't matter. What I see is a woman like me. She's a low sense of self. I resonate with that. I project myself onto that. She is me. I am her. So there's nothing negative, however truthful it is, about her that will stick with me. Because to acknowledge that is to acknowledge that I'm less. That's exactly where I don't want to go. For a low sense of selfer, the worst thing to do is to be exposed, to be found out, to see my shame. So I absolutely will not go there. And if I'm projecting myself onto her, which is a common trait for low sense of selfers, I'm trying to get out of who I am, be someplace else. This is why actors and actresses tend to be liberals, to be somebody different. They don't want to be who they are. This is why the media likes to be, or is liberals. They draw people of liberal background because they can control. They can control information. So I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to accept, no matter how blindingly true it is, because I'm oblivious to truth. I'm oblivious to reason. I'm trying to connect. I'm trying to fill the hole in my soul. I'm trying to feel not so wounded. And she is me. And if you go after her, you can say what facts and truths or whatever, but all I experience is you're attacking her. You're attacking me. And then I start calling the names or whatever else because, this has gotten personal. We can't have this discussion. So this is why people talk past one another. You can have from a rational perspective, and you can have from this using words to make emotional connections. And they are two different paradigms. And you try to talk assuming the other person's in this paradigm, it won't work. But now if you understand persons operating from this other paradigm, then you can have successful communication. It may still be considered unpleasant because a person with a low sense of self, to call them out as a low sense of self, or is a shaming. That's to bringing it out that they don't want to be known. So it still is difficult, but that's a necessary truth for them to address, right? An alcoholic, they've got a problem with alcoholism, but that problem is a second order problem, maybe even third order. It's a symptom of a deeper problem. Addictions are a trait for a low sense of self. There's another way to escape who you are. When I drink or take this drug or whatever, I'm not me anymore. I'm doing something different. I'm out of myself. That's appealing to me because being who I am is not appealing to me. So those escapes, whether it's through drugs or through entertainment or through whatever it is, that I can get out of myself, those are indications of a person who doesn't like who they are. So to tell an alcoholic that you think that you can give them data about here's why I think you've got a problem, you've lost your job, you've lost your family, blah, blah, blah. There may be at some point they're willing to listen because they've lost so much, when the so-called hit bottom. But to say those words is not likely to register, certainly not the first time. But to not say those words, yeah, I'll just give him another drink, that's what he likes, that's irresponsible. So it's a difficult situation that needs to be addressed in a responsible manner. So however gently and kindly and in a way that is most willing to be accepted, or at least planting seeds, is the way you interact with a person with a low sense of self. You lay those seeds and plant those seeds. But in the meantime, what needs to be done is limit their capability to negatively impact others. Right? You can limit the reach of a person with a low sense of self by limiting the power in the positions in which those people will find themselves. Limiting the power, for instance, of government, limiting its reach is a very good thing because that, probably more than any other, draws the low sense of self, or it's like poop will draw flies. This is why you see lots of rhinos, because they'll talk about freedom and this and that's what they need to do to get elected, but they get in there and they really didn't mean those things, and they were making emotional connections, right? That's not, they didn't care about the truth or reality of what they were saying. They were making emotional connections so they get votes. They get in there and they become rhinos. So Republican in name only is really more of freedom oriented in name only, because they get in there and they're not. They want to go the other way. But you'll never see dinos, Democrats in name only. Well, they come in and they talk about they want to try to make everybody equal in state and put in this program, that program, grow the government this way, that way, and then get up there and try to promote freedom. You'll never see that happen. Because a person who is freedom-oriented is going to be somebody who's honest and open. They will not use that kind of deceitful behavior to get elected in a position of power. So that explains why there are lots and lots of rhinos, zero dinos, and there will never be one. So how does this help one grow all aspects of one's life? By recognizing where everyone stands in this continuum of a sense of self, you can always grow it stronger. And as you grow it stronger, life becomes richer in every aspect, right? Whether it's in your confidence, in your openness, in your willingness to give credit where credit is due, take responsibility where it's due. As you grow in those ways, your life just will get richer because you are living more authentically. It's more real. It's not a facade. And a way you can move that way, this list that I referred to earlier that I said I'm going to share with you, if you take traits of a person with a low sense of self, and you may have some of those, and you focus on growing them stronger into the strong sense of self column, and you do that with multiple traits and more, you start to move more and more traits into the characteristics of a strong sense of self. Guess what? You are by definition a person with a strong sense of self. You can act yourself into being a person with a strong sense of self. We have in our culture, and probably beyond our culture, what I consider to be an epidemic of low sense of self. So if it looks like the world in some ways is spinning out of control, maybe worse than it's ever been, I believe it comes from this. Our sense of self was formed, I mentioned early on, very early in our lives, in our infancy, deep in our infancy. Did we feel right? Before we're a physical, we're a spiritual, we're an emotional being far before we're ever a rational being. And as we're forming ourselves, do we feel right? Is this world a safe place? Is it a right place? Am I at one with it? Am I comfortable in my own skin? It's not rational thoughts, but it's just this feeling, this spiritual thing, an emotional thing. Is it all right? Is this world a positive place? And being egocentric as we are as infants, it's not the world and me. I am the world. So if something's not right, it's I'm not right. And this is very deep in our core. Our very first impression. You cannot access it through reason. It's deeper than that. So when you have parents who are not engaged in extended breast nurturing, in arms experience, in shared sleeping, putting kids on schedules, sleeping them down the hall, passing them off to somebody else to parent, putting them down so they don't get spoiled, let babies cry it out. When you're doing our standard parenting practices that are only standard for the last few generations, it hasn't gone back more than about 100 years when we've done these kinds of things, we are ripping ourselves from our core physiology. We are screwing with Mother Nature. And there's consequences that come with that, serious consequences. And we're living those now. So one way to try to reclaim as an adult our sense of self is to move ourselves that, make conscious effort to move ourselves that way. And it takes conscious effort. Just like learning, you didn't choose your first language, right? You were born into an environment, there was that language around, that's what you learned, that's what you got. Now it takes effort to learn any other language. It's a conscious thing. You can't just plop yourself someplace and learn it, right? Osmosis. It takes effort. You have to think about it, you have to do things, you have to learn words, you have to translate in your mind. So there's effort for that. Changing your sense of self from that initial one, strengthening that sense of self, takes more effort than that. So I talk about one way. There's other ways to do it too. I'm going to focus just on this one in this presentation, because I want to talk about one more thing. And that's the concept of evil. I don't believe in a notion of there are some people innately evil, and they do these things that are evil. Whether it's betraying a country, whether this and that, those are evil things. We look at them, and we can label it evil, but for a person to be evil, it's like that becomes irredeemable, right? There's nothing you can do about evil except for squash it. I look at it as what those are unhealthy acts growing out from an unhealthy state that a person is in. So I can kill somebody. You say, well, that's evil. Well, it was out of self-defense. Okay, well, maybe that wasn't evil. Well, at what level is my self-defense? This guy was offending me. This guy was... So what I consider an attack on me may be for a lot of other people that your life was in immediate danger there. But I'm perceiving it as that way. So if you believe it's okay to kill someone in self-defense, my notion of where that ends or begins is a lot further than yours. When I steal something, you say, well, maybe to steal to keep your family or feed your family. Okay, my notion of stealing when that need becomes important is more extended than yours. So I'm acting as, well, now I'm a thief, I'm a murderer, and this and that. Well, he's a truly evil person. No, he's a person that's really unhealthy. And he's trying in ways to get these needs met. And in their ways they're impinging on other people because, guess what? I'm a navel gazer. I'm self-absorbed. It's all about me. I. When I speak, it's all about me. So this is where evil comes from. This is the roots of evil. In every tyrant and every criminal, there are people who are focused on themselves and getting their needs met. And it's not all about the money. There's more things important than the money. Money's a mechanism to get something else. So if their needs for self-love and self-esteem are not met, then other people don't really matter. If I don't matter, then no one else matters to me. I don't matter to me. And I matter enough that I want to survive, or maybe I want to try to do more thriving, at least feel less wretched. So I'll do whatever it takes and screw whoever else is out there, because it's self-preservation. We are wired to self-preserve, right? Genetically, the genes want to continue on. So this is the root of evil. So that's another thing that's explaining the inexplicable, right? Some people aren't born evil, but at a very early age, and you'll see even some children will torture animals or do whatever, and they tend to, if not tended to, grow up to become harder criminals than that. But nobody's innately built to torture animals. What they had was unmet needs growing deep in their childhood. So dysfunctional parents, dysfunctional home life, even parents who were maybe not so dysfunctional, they were perceived, the world was perceived as such by that child, by an infant. And the damaged goods, they're going to spread their damage. They're going to project that damage out and put it on other people. Because, hey, if I had to do it, you got to do it too. What do I care? So there's the roots of evil. So this was it. This was my understanding I want to share with you about where motivations come to embrace ideologies. Whether you're socialist or liberal or progressive or whatever, that kind of flavor largely comes out of the neighborhood you live in, the parents you had, and when, I'm going to be the same, or I want to be against whatever those my parents were. But they're the minor flavors of the core thing. And the core thing is, do I embrace the concept of freedom and the value that's there with that innate positive of nature, of humanity, or because I'm somehow disconnected from my humanity, or I feel that way, I'm after having everybody be like me, lowered in state, so we're equal in state, so I'm not less than. And I might be liberal, socialist, whatever, any of those flavors of an ideology, but the core flavor comes out of the core of me feeling less than. And I'll talk about fairness, and I'll talk about victim groups, and I'll use words to make emotional connections. This is an opportunity that you have for yourself and for those you interact with to help them understand why it is why they are as they are, why you are as you are. You cannot understand the physical world without understanding the concept of gravity. You don't have to know all the formulas or whatever, but you understand the laws of motion. You get that, but it all comes out of gravity, Newton's laws that he described physics with. You cannot understand the social world, including the political world, without understanding the preeminence of the sense of self, that plays for individuals and then collectively as a society. You now have the opening of that understanding. If you didn't have it before, here it is. It's great knowledge. With that comes great power. With great power comes great responsibility. And I ask you to use it wisely. Thank you for your time.